Welcome to another episode of Reverse Inflammaging Summit, Body and Mind Longevity Medicine. And I'm very pleased in this session to have Dr. Joe Dispenza, a best-selling New York Times author, lecturer, corporate consultant. And his work is focused on really helping people make significant changes in their lives, healing from illness, and evolving their consciousness. And so, Joe, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. And one of the things that I appreciate about your work is how important you hold research. And it's not just to do the things that you do, but to research and actually demonstrate the results of what you are doing. So I'd love to hear why you got into doing the research, what the research is about. And I know to some degree it has to do a little bit about your own particular healing. So maybe you can start from that perspective.
Sure. I'm happy to do that. I just think it's a time in history where it's not enough to know. I think this is a time in history to know how. And I think that people do the best with what they think is available. And if they're unavailable, they're unaware of it. And if that's the case, they continuously make the same choice. So in 1986, I got run over by a truck in a triathlon in Palm Springs, California. Had multiple compression fractures of my spine, six vertebrae.
Wow.
As you know, when you compress vertebrae, the volume of matter has to go somewhere. And in my case, it went back on the cord. I had a fracture of the neural arch of T8, and it was more than 60% compressed. So I was in trouble. And as you know, the typical procedure for that is Harrington rod surgery. Had 4 opinions from 4 leading surgeons, and the prognosis wasn't good whether I got the surgery or not. So I thought, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing anything. I'm basically laying face down. Is it possible then that my mind could begin to influence my body? And if I'm not moving around and I'm not experiencing a lot of things and I have a little bit of time to go inward, and is it possible if I build a model or a concept or an idea in my mind that I can construct, could I get so lost in the experience that it could begin to influence my body? And it worked. And I was back on my feet in about 10 weeks and 10 and a half weeks and back living my life again.
Amazing. Yeah.
And during that time, I just made a deal with myself that if I was ever able to walk again, I would study the mind-body connection for the rest of my life and do my best to demystify the process. And so I got involved in studying spontaneous remissions after my own personal recovery. Just wondered if anybody else, ever had a similar experience, and if they did, what were those elements that they either practiced or demonstrated or thought in some way. And I really thought it would be about things that I believed to be important. And some of those things were important assets, but it really was how the mind could possibly change. And so I discovered some commonalities in people that had spontaneous remissions. They were treating conventionally or unconventionally, and they were staying the same or getting worse, and all of a sudden they got better. And I just really wanted to understand the cause of what was producing that effect. So I went to 17 different countries and interviewed hundreds of people. This is in the 90s, and just really looked to see what they had in common. And those 4 commonalities really had everything to do with kind of the principles of new science, like neuroplasticity and neuroendocrinology and psychoneuroimmunology and epigenetics and the concepts of neuroscience were beginning to change. And then when you see that the brain could actually change. So the majority of the things that they did had everything to do with them making personal changes. In other words, your personality creates your personal reality. And your personality is made of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. And my interest was, if you're thinking the same way, you're making the same choices, you're doing the same things, you're creating the same experiences, you're feeling the same emotions, your biology should pretty much stay the same because you're the same. So then is it possible if you give people new information? And information actually is what begins to cause new synaptic connections in the brain. And you add new stitches into the three-dimensional tapestry, you got some raw materials then to begin to think differently, and that could lead to making new choices, and new choices could lead to new behaviors, and new behaviors create new experiences, and do new experiences actually create new feelings and emotions? Would our biology change as a result of that? So the discovery of what people did when they had their own personal changes and transformations, the demystifying of that process, led me to see if I could reproduce the outcome. Is it possible then to do exactly what these people did? If they changed the way they thought, they changed the way they acted, and they changed the way they felt, if they really understood the science of what they were doing and why they were doing it, could the how become practical, and could we assign meaning to the task? And if we do, the prefrontal cortex turns on and you get a greater outcome, you get a greater result. And you can put someone in an ice bath, and as you know, in a minute or so, they're going to have hypothermia. Give that person the same exposure to the same conditions, but give them some information, tell them the benefits of ice, and give them something to do. And is it possible then when they assign meaning to the task that they gain value from it? And the answer is absolutely yes. So I thought, okay, these people were healing themselves. Now that I understand some of the things that they did that had everything to do with their own personal change, they became a new personality. And in a sense, the disease existed in the old personality. And I interviewed enough people, and I was really humbled and really surprised that they were from all walks of life. Some people ate certain foods, other people didn't. I couldn't find anything except this concept of how stress downregulates genes and creates disease, and everybody had some trauma, some issue, some problem in their life that was agitating them. And here's a great example of the mind-body connection. I mean, the arousal of stress hormones, puts our body into a state of emergency. When we're living in stress, we're living in survival. When we're in that state, we're out of homeostasis. We're mobilizing enormous amounts of resources and energy to prepare our body for that event. Long term, it's really vital for us our attention to be heightened and our senses to be heightened and us to focus. It's good for the short term. But the long-term effects somehow in time rob the body of all its vitality, all of its natural resources of energy. And if we can think about our problems and turn on the same stress response as if the event was actually happening, and if stress long-term effects create disease and push the genetic buttons, that means then our thoughts could literally make us sick, because we're turning on that stress response just by thought alone, and we turn on the stress response and we can't turn it off. Now we're headed for some change in our biology. And so these people had experiences where they understood that they had some hand in their own health condition.